This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. It is certainly something that can be a challenge. It can be wonderful, but it can also be a challenge. And the numbers increase all the time, especially with the divorce rate and people reconnecting. And I'm referring to blended families. A lot of good stuff there, a lot of challenge there when you've got different cultures, potentially different values, all coming together, mixing in children and all of that. Where do you find support? Where do you find counseling? Somebody that specializes in that. I found her. She is the founder of Gifts of Grace Inspired. And she does mental health counseling, also pastoral counseling. And one of her fortes is the blended family. So we are going to talk with Paula Meadows Mason today on the program. How you doing?
Doing good. How are you today, Steve?
Really good. Really good. This is one of those things that people don't talk about. But if you're part of a blended family situation, and I'm not being negative here, it's wonderful. But in any situation that involves families, there's always going to be things that you have to deal with. I believe anybody says, my family's perfect, everything is wonderful, we never have a problem, they're not being truthful.
They're delusional.
You're delusional. You're lying to yourself. Let's be real. And again, we're not being negative. We're just being realists about this. The blended family, what is out of the gate when you work with families who are blended? What are some of the things that are coming up more than others?
A lot of tension usually between the step parent and the stepchildren.
Okay. And does that, when we say stepchildren, could that be of any age, even if the stepchildren are even adults?
Absolutely. Yeah. Each age group has its challenges. The younger they are, they may not be as verbal to express maybe conflicting or confusing messages they're getting. You have your tweens and your teenagers that, they're half child, half wannabe adult.
Yep.
And again, they have mixed emotions about, I'm not sure how I feel about this person coming in. Are they really accepting me? Or are they just here for my parent? And then the adults, actually, in some cases, they could be very similar to the teenagers. They may not want to share their parents' attention, their resources, their time.
Speaking of time, and I'm sure this is a question that you get a lot. Two people get together, they have children. Already had children. How do you know when it's right to introduce that person to your children?
That's a tricky one. If they just meet, like if they don't have prior connections of friendship, coworker, something like that, I would say at least a good 6 months to a year, just kind of building that friendship, that strong connection. And is it important enough that you feel it could go to something long-term like a marriage? So I would say that.
And I would also imagine that it really depends on the children, their age, their mindset, what they've been through. Let's say a divorce took place. Maybe it didn't go that well. So now they're, maybe on guard a little bit, right?
Possibly. And I hate to say it over and over, but there's just so many different variables on how things could play out. If it was a toxic marriage and the children were aware, even though that other parent is not in the home anymore, there actually might be some relief. And especially if they saw that parent that they're staying with primarily endured a lot of insults, abuse, neglect, that kind of thing.
I feel it's at that time when somebody consults with you, and even in that situation, that's where it's a It's the Paula fact finding mission. You got to get all your facts. There's all different pieces here. So to really come up with a good view of what's happening, it's like making a dish. You need all the ingredients in front of you before you actually start working on it or cooking, right? You need to know.
Absolutely. That's actually one of the things I'm just kind of establishing in the first 2 or 3 sessions, is just kind of really getting a good background of, you know, whose kids are bringing in, who do they stay with, what is the visitation schedule, what's the relationship like with the co-parents,
Mm.
how did it end? Was it amicable? Was it hostile? Those kind of things. So yeah, it's very much a fact-finding mission.
Tell us more about the blended family counseling that you offer. Different aspects, or walk us through that journey.
Well, I oftentimes encounter, well, I'll put them in two broad groups. I have ones who are pre-blending, so either they're looking to be engaged or they're already engaged. And then I have the ones that have already married. So the ones that haven't blended yet, I have a series of subjects that I'll kind of go through and ask them. And it's really more just kind of probing their expectations, like what is their vision of how they think this blended thing is going to play out. A lot of times I'll bring up subjects that they don't necessarily think about, or they may not even think it's relevant. For example,
Hmm.
how would, say, the new partner feel about still having a good relationship with the former in-laws, particularly the grandparents or the aunts and the uncles? Some people may be bothered by that. Others, it's not a big deal because they understand, even though that's not, their partner's family anymore, that's still the children's family. So just bringing up awareness and at least getting them to start those conversations so that they can hopefully try to address as much as they can before they get married. So for the ones that they've already married, a lot of times they're coming in, a lot of tension between the step parent and the children they bring in together, or it's the new partner and the former spouse.
Mm.
And those are always interesting because I'm not counseling the former spouse. So it's really just kind of giving them possible insight as far as why the former spouse may be responding that way. A lot of times it's unforgiveness. They're still holding on to a lot of hurt feelings, resentment, maybe the way how the divorce played out. And it could be just plain old simple jealousy. That person is in the spot that they used to be. And now, that time, that energy that they were able to solely give, now there's someone of the same sex, pouring into their children. That could be a hard pill to swallow.
For sure. And you're bringing up images of somebody I know very well who's
Mm-hmm.
been with somebody at least 7 years, and they didn't marry.
Mm-hmm.
They each got divorced,
Okay.
but her spouse, and I know him well. I know her too, but I know him better.
Mm-hmm.
Not her spouse. My friend is connected to her boyfriend, girlfriend. Her spouse is still very much in her kids' lives, which
Mm-hmm.
is fantastic. The only challenge is it's almost as if he tries to overdo it and is a pity party. Look at me, I'm all by myself now. And there's more there. We can keep going layers deeper.
Right.
And my friend who's dating this woman for a long time, he accepts it, he understands it, and and yes, it's wonderful that those the children have their dad and he's active, but there's
Right.
more to it than that. And then it just alienates my friend from those children because my friend looks like in their eyes because of their father and things that their father says or doesn't say, but just I'm all by myself down the street here in this lonely apartment. I'll come by. It makes my friend look bad.
Right.
And they haven't accepted my friend after 7 years.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot
I know.
about
Yes.
it. And I'm always saying that, anytime you're considering blending, it is not for the faint at heart. You have got to have, endurance and pretty much nerves of steel to really hang in there and stick it out.
Yeah.
Because it could take up to 7 years to blend well.
Yeah. And you know where they're at now?
Mm,
The children are getting older and they're in their teens, upper teens in that territory. So
mhm.
basically it seems like when they're off to college, one is already, and the other one soon, that's where life will change or begin, depending on how you look at it, for the
Right.
couple. For the couple.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And depending on the child and the situation, as the children get older, they do kind of start coming into some self realities,
Yes.
as far as the the story presented to them and the actual reality.
I know what you're saying. And I've
Mhm.
always said that, even in my journey, never say anything bad about the other parent. Never. You could have scars on your cheek from biting it, but
Right?
never say anything because the truth always comes out,
It
whatever
does.
the situation is. Kids figure it out. They figure
They,
it out. Yeah.
they do. And it's always best when they figure it out
True.
instead of you point it out, because then it looks like you're shaming the other parent or you're
Yep.
bad mouthing the other parent. So, yeah, but it's just waiting that out sometimes can be really difficult.
Hmm. Yeah, like I said, the scar on the cheek. You just keep
Hmm.
keep it quiet, and as mom used to say, take the high road. Take the high road. Sometimes
Yeah.
the high road is very bumpy and it's very steep. It's not easy, but that's what you got to do to keep that harmony. Some other suggestions: blended families. What comes to mind?
Hmm. Well, when you're blending, a lot of the times it's, his kids, her kids, or, whatever the situation is. A lot of times the kids will feel like, oh, well, you favor your kids over
Mm,
me and vice versa. So, one of the first things I encourage the partners to do is to establish household rules and expectations of behavior. Something that they both can compromise on as far as, whatever child, yours, mine's, ours, is in this home, this is what we expect to happen. And I say compromise because what you don't want to do is have one partner, get what they want and the other one feels like they're always caving, because that can come back and bite you too.
hmm.
So I strongly urge them to try to find, a compromise, and those places get stuck. We'll just kind of try to work through that. And there's almost always a compromise. So establish the household rules, do that in private, away from the kids. And then also establish, if these expectations are not met, what are the consequences going to be for that? And make it uniformed, across the board. Now, of course, there's exceptions to that. You're not going to, correct a teenager like you would a 6-year-old. But yeah, you want to try to make it as unified and as fair as possible.
It seems like you have to have a plan with expectations. You can't
Absolutely.
just dive in and we'll just we'll figure it out how it goes along. You really got to go behind the scenes and kind of work this out.
You do. Kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week, as far as you have to be willing to do the work,
Yeah.
and a lot of times, yeah, some people will just jump in, and one of the biggest myths I have is, oh, we'll love each other, and so it'll just kind of all work out. No,
Yeah. Yeah.
no,
I got you on that. It's like love is the answer. There's love here. It just all the pieces come together. No, they really don't.
no, no,
Not
no.
all. They can. They can.
They can't.
If but very rare,
It is
very
a very
rare.
hard moment. And then, just because you guys love each other does not equate to their kids are going to love you.
Which
That's one
is
of the other myths.
exactly right. All right. So I want to throw a real situation and your feedback on this.
Sure.
You have a couple, and this
Mhm.
is in my circle. This is not just made up. This is real. You
Okay.
have a couple dating a little over 2 years.
Hmm.
They each have kids.
Hmm.
They each have two kids.
Hmm.
The kids are the same age. Amazing. Like within a couple of weeks, whatever, month.
Oh, okay.
2 years, over 2 years together. And one of the couple says the other, and by the way, each of them has met each other's kids and they're great. Everything's fantastic. Everybody likes each other. The kid,
Excellent.
except
Uh-oh.
the kids have not met each other.
Interesting.
2.5 years. So one half of the couple says to the other, when are our kids going to meet? And the reply is, I don't know. Why don't you know? I don't know. Okay. Time goes on, another few months or whatever. Same question comes up, same answer comes up. If you heard that, what would you think? Is that a red flag? Is it reasonable that they haven't met? What are your thoughts? Again, this is a real situation.
I would definitely say that's a red flag because if you can't give me a reason why you've met your partner's kids, and vice versa, but the kids haven't met each other, I would really dig into that
Mm,
because you
yeah.
should be able to tell me something. It's 2.5 years into this thing. You either know that this is probably going to good fit, or she or he is a good fit for you, or you don't. So I would
Or
definitely
you're
dig
not, potentially, you're not ready for the blended family. You're not ready for the next step. And that's what would be the family blending once the kids meet. Now you're mixing things together.
but you've kind of semi blended anyway by introducing your partner to the kids. So you're
Point.
already
Very
you
good.
kind of stepped into it anyway.
Point
So,
taken. Point taken. Yeah.
um,
You're halfway there.
exactly.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would definitely dig into that. And 2.5 years and the kids, especially, I mean, that you would think that would kind of be like an optimum situation where the
Doesn't
kids
get any
are
better than that
their
because
same age.
they can relate to each other. Each
Right.
parent can relate to the other kid because they're all going through the same thing.
Yeah.
Starting college, different year in high school, whatever it is. Um, that's the time to call Paula in that situation because it's happening in my world. I'm aware of. Where do you go with that other than that's either keep riding that train or time for the train to stop, depending on what your goals are for your life, future relationship, and everything like that.
Agreed. Because, the other partner who's asking about it clearly, is eager and wanting to kind of finish that step. The hesitation on the other partner may have the asking partner, pause like what you is this not as serious as I think it is? And then
Right.
you also have to think about the kids. The kids obviously know you're dating someone
Right.
because you met each other's kids.
Sure. Sure.
I'm pretty sure they probably know there are kids in the situation.
That's a great point. I know where you're going with that. Aren't the kids wondering? Because if you've met the other's kids, you've
Mm-hmm.
talked about them. So
Exactly.
you know that the other person, the person you're dating, has kids the same age. So why wouldn't you connect it together? Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. And it could potentially put some negative thoughts in their heads because it's like, well, why are
What's
they
wrong with me?
or why are they keeping those kids from are they bad kids? Do they already hate me?
Right. Right. And just because the kids may meet doesn't necessarily mean that wedding bells are going to be ringing next week at all. It's
Exactly.
just it's just another step in the evolution of a relationship, one would think. Um, it's my belief that in my journey of life, that before a couple takes these further steps, they go through some kind of coaching, counseling, or therapy. I think every couple should. At,
I
at
agree.
the at the very least, the five love languages. You can
Hmm.
all laugh at them, but it says a lot about what you need and want. And many of us take care of our partner thinking the way we would take care of ourselves, the way we want.
Absolutely.
But they're not looking for that, potentially, you know?
Absolutely. I've often told, friends and colleagues, I think they make it way too hard for us to get divorced and way too easy for us to get married. I
Yeah.
wish it was reversed where you had to go through 10 sessions of counseling and, meeting of this, that, so that people really understand what they're getting into. And then hopefully with that knowledge, and then they work on things and it still doesn't work out, then it makes it easier to part. But yeah, the five languages is something I am constantly using as a reference, whether I'm counseling or I'm coaching. And it's also great to build rapport with, new family members.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Because it's not just about a romantic relationship. The love language could be your love language with your kid.
Absolutely.
They speak differently. How many men have said this? I do everything for my family. I do everything for my wife. I built this. I renovated. I got them this. I got them that. This is my love. This is and meanwhile, their spouse just wants words of
Affirmation.
affection, or
Yeah.
affirmations, or gifts of service, or whatever it might be. But that the other half is thinking this is good enough because I would want this. Just saying, hypothetically, that's not my love language. I already know it. Words of affirmation and affection. However the affection is phrased, I forget what it is.
Oh, physical touch.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know your languages. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Everybody's different. Everybody's different.
they are. And,
Mm.
they can change over time.
Oh
Usually
yeah.
once you hit, um, 30s ish, it's pretty solid. But, as we're growing up, it can definitely change and be influenced by different things. But
Yeah.
so important to know that just about yourself and
Right.
definitely about your partner and any kids in the situation.
Um, they say we change or go through change, and it varies whenever I hear it. Some people I've heard 3 years,
Hmm.
some therapist counselors would say 5 years.
Yeah,
We're always going, reevaluating our lives. And so I could think it's reasonable that maybe a love language might, in the top five there, kind of change position from time to time as you figure yourself out.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And it could even change with the influence of a partner.
Because you realize things that you didn't realize because somebody else came along. It's almost, or
Mhm.
they're the mirror in front of you. You
Exactly.
have that realization. Paul, always great talking with you. How does somebody connect with you if they're going through any of these kind of challenges?
Best way to reach me is with my work cell, and that is 804-404-7135.
You have her phone number. Just 804-404-7135 would be the best way. I'm not sure if you have a website up. I can't recall.
I do. It's coaching with GOGI, which is Gifts of Grace Inspired, um, dot Wixsite, WIXSITE.com /Paula Meadows Mason.
Thank you for the clarity on the GOGI.
Right?
You mentioned that last week, and I was like, maybe that's her nickname. I'm not really sure. Now I
No,
got it. That's the name of your
no.
practice.
Yeah, I was trying to make it user friendly. And so it's a lot easier to type out GOGI than Gifts of Grace Inspired, which is quite lengthy. So,
Gotcha. Thank you so much for being here today. Important topic, and
mhm.
not just involving a couple, those around them. And many times we don't know where to turn. So I really appreciate it. Looking forward next time we get together.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. It's definitely one of my passions.
Thank you. And it shows. This is your purpose for sure. We'll be right back.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.